From Antioch, and her flight was delayed. So we're glad everybody's here. So welcome to another meeting, another segment of the ad hoc committee looking at the regulations of short-term rental properties. We have host compliance here today. That's what some of the committee members had asked for. I'm sorry for the way this thing is set up, where everybody's back, but can you all hear us okay? Okay, so Mr. Binzer, I'll tell you that we've been in another room at all these meetings, so everybody's been closed, so we sort of have been kind of informal. We're a little bit more formal today because we're actually in the chamber. But we do, if people have questions in the back, we actually listen to everybody, okay? So with that, I wouldn't mind for you introducing yourself. And then kind of explain what your role is, and then I think you have a PowerPoint presentation. Is that right? Okay, so we will let you kind of do it. Are there any questions from any members of the committee or the council members that are here before we get started? Everybody's good to go? So again, Mr. Binzer, we appreciate you being here. Again, very informal. We just sort of, if somebody has a question, they'll usually raise their hand, and we'll just take the questions, and we'll let you get started. So if you don't mind, introduce yourself to everybody, and then let's proceed ahead. But I'm not going to turn your mic on because I don't want to. Okay, there you go.
All right, I think we're in business here. So first of all, thanks for your patience. My flight decided to not take off on time, so I apologize for the delay. I was asked to just do a quick introduction, and I actually put a slide together on that, so I'm just going to jump to that, and you should hopefully see it up on your screens right now. I'll give you both an introduction to Host Compliance, who we are and what we do, and also just a quick introduction to myself so you know who's talking in front of you. To start with, the company Host Compliance is a Silicon Valley, San Francisco-based company that does only one thing, and that is help local governments like in Nashville stay on top of the short-term rental market in order to make sure everyone follow the rules. And there's a number of aspects to the solution. I'll talk about that in a little bit in more detail later in the presentation. But I think it's important to know that we really only focus on this issue, which allowed us to become, I would say, probably some of the nation's leading experts on this particular topic. The team behind the company consists of two types of people. There are people who have a lot of experience working with local governments on the software side for the better of their career. And then the other part of the team are sort of hardcore data scientists out of like the best companies and schools in San Francisco. So my co-founder David is a Caltech applied math guy, and we're really coming at this from a very sort of software and data science-y kind of perspective, because what we found is, given the growth of this industry, you really need to deploy really advanced technologies and thinking in order to stay on top of it. To just give you a quick introduction to myself, my name is Ulrich Binzer. I founded this company in 2015, and I did that in response to actually serving on a committee very similar to the committee that I'm speaking at today. In the town that I live in, just north of San Francisco, there was a big debate about short-term rentals in the summer of 2015. I was appointed to this because I'd been involved with doing Airbnb at my own house. As part of the committee work, quickly came to the conclusion that the city and cities in general just didn't have the data and tools to really tackle the issues associated with this new industry. So fast forward 2 years, we have now acquired about 70 customers. So we're partnering with cities such as Denver, Vancouver, Seattle, Toronto, more locally places like Durham County, Asheville, and Virginia Beach, and then of course here in Nashville, on all of these particular issues. List is growing rapidly. We're adding 1 or 2 customers a week right now, which is great, and the team is growing rapidly as well. As I alluded to, we do really 3 things as it relates to short-term rentals. The first thing is that we aggregate data, clean data, and make the data actionable. The second thing we do is we have built a suite of compliance monitoring and enforcement solutions that when cities do have ordinances in place, makes it a lot easier and more effective to make sure that everyone play by those rules. And then thirdly, we do some consulting work to help cities adopt ordinances and think through the enforcement strategies in order to be as effective as they possibly can. So that was a little bit of introduction to us. Happy to answer any questions to this at this point if you have any. Otherwise, I'll continue and we can do that as well.
Any questions from anybody at this point? Can you tell us, and it may be in a further slide, but in terms of your relationship with Nashville, when did it start contractually, and kind of where are we in that process?
Absolutely, yeah. So our relationship with Nashville has been a long, drawn-out process. We're finally here now today, but we started discussions, I would say, more than a year ago. The city, being very prudent, decided to do an RFP after they'd actually awarded the contract to us, which was a little bit of a setback timing-wise, but we ended up then also winning the RFP. Then there was a challenge to the RFP, and sort of like 6 months later, we finally got the contract in, I would say, July of 2017. We had then been working on setting up, and we're actually very close to sort of like sending out the first letters, and I'm here today to meet with staff later tomorrow, where we're going to talk about all the stuff, but I can tell you sort of a little bit more about what we're actually going to be doing in the following slides.
Okay, that's fine. Yep. Thank you.
So before I jump into what we're doing for Nashville, I want to just set a little bit of context, because not everyone in the room may be sort of like super familiar with the challenges associated with enforcing short-term rental rules. And there are a number of things that are difficult when you try to do this manually. The first thing you're faced with is that you need to monitor a large amount of websites. People tend to be very focused on Airbnb, potentially HomeAway, VRBO, and other sites, but the reality is there's more than 125 different websites out there that does short-term vacation rentals. Just figuring out which ones are important in any given market actually takes a lot of work, and it constantly changes. Just since we started the business, we have had to add about 20 more sites to our sites we monitor, just because the market is really fragmenting. The reason for that is some of the major sites are becoming very difficult to actually rank on. So if you're trying to get people to see your home or your ads, you easily get completely buried in the results, like on page 20, and then obviously no one books it. So as a result, more and more websites are popping up every day, and you need to constantly stay on top of that. The second problem you face with is that there are literally thousands of listings out there, and they constantly change. I'll show you some numbers in a second. So staying on top of who is currently active, who is actually renting is quite a daunting task if you don't have any software to do that. Also, the address information on these listings is hidden. So you can't just like go online and download a list of addresses. What you can see online is a map generally. On that map is a large circle, and the websites just tell you that the property is located somewhere inside of that circle. They actually go through great efforts to deliberately scramble the true location. So they add a random latitude and longitude to make things very difficult. As a result, as a city employee tasked with tracking these down, it becomes very labor intensive and time consuming. Obviously, it's very hard to know who's actually renting and for how much and for how long. That information is not clearly listed on the websites again, so as a tax auditor or someone who's responsible for enforcing occupancy limits and stuff like that, it's hard to get that data without the help of software. The platforms have not been very forthcoming with information generally. This may be changing over time, but generally they claim for privacy and other reasons that they can't share a lot of information with the city. So that makes things a little bit more difficult. One could say, why don't we just take a reactionary approach and just wait for people to call in and essentially tell us about these unlicensed properties and so forth? that has turned out to be very ineffective. Most times you only hear about issues when things have gone completely haywire, and at that point it's generally too late. Also, you only hear about maybe the most egregious noise and parking and trash violations. You don't hear about the people who are essentially operating in non-compliance with zoning ordinances and stuff like that. And then finally, as it relates to nuisances and actually being responsive to those, most cities are not equipped to deal with them in real time, collect the evidence that's needed and so forth in order to really document violations. So this is just a little bit of context for our solution because it's been designed to address all of these issues.
Any questions with that? So let me tell the council members that your computer is not working, so you can't hit the little button to say you want to talk. Okay, so you have to wave, or if you'd rather, I think I can turn on all your microphones right now, and you can just pick it up. What's easier for you? Okay. All right. Just giving you all the options. All right.
Right. To just put some numbers out there, we did an analysis where we looked at the turnover in the Nashville market, just to give you a sense of how dynamic it is. And what we did was in July 2016, we ran an analysis. At that point, there were 4,570 active short-term rental listings in the city of Nashville. Then we did the same analysis in February of 17, so just like shy of 9 months later. At that time, the number of listings had actually grown dramatically to about 5,761. But what this doesn't actually show is that there's also been a large amount of churn in the market. So if you look at the number of new listings that were added between those two data points, essentially 3,317 listings were added. Meanwhile, 2,200 listings were taken off the market. So if you sort of think about that for a second, that means that 58% of the listings that were active in February 17 were actually new listings. And I think there's a question on that.
Your mic is live.
And I'm guessing you're sophisticated enough to take overlap into account. So those listings are single, separate properties. If someone's listed on 3 websites, you only are counting them once. Is that correct?
Yeah, so actually for this analysis, we only did listings, but we do the deduplication as well. This one I wanted to show on a listing basis because as a city employee, you have to actually go out and find the address of every one of those listings until you know it's a duplicate. So it just highlights like how much work really goes into staying on top of it. That's the point. Did that answer your question?
So is that?
So this is listings. We can do the same on a properties basis if you wanted to, and I'll show you some numbers. Yeah, it'll be a smaller number, exactly. And what you're seeing is a lot of people are now cross-listing. So a lot of people will have 2 or 3 ads for the same property. Yeah. Okay, so that was a little bit about the dynamic nature and why staying on top of this market is very critical.
So can I ask you a question? Can you go back to is there any indication of there were 2,226 listings deactivated? Do you know why? Any indication of why those things are deactivated?
So that's a good question. The short-term rental market is different from traditional businesses in that a lot of the people who do it only very rarely. Like, so for example, if you're going on vacation out of town, you may decide to just list your apartment for the weekend or maybe for the week while you're going to, who knows, Europe or whatever. A lot of people use this to fund their trips, basically. And as a result, these are short-lived businesses from a sort of city perspective. So a lot of the 226 listings that went away is likely those kinds of listings. So listings that basically went away. There are also people who maybe tried being a host, they had a bad experience or they didn't think it was worth the hassle. It does require like a fair amount of cleanup. For example, you don't want to have all your bank papers and social security cards and stuff around, and they maybe decided it wasn't worth the couple $100 they made. So there are lots of different reasons why people deactivate listings, but generally it tends to be the sort of like less professional people who do that. But the thing is, again, as a new listing come on, you don't know which one is going to be the professional one going forward. So you have to go out and find everyone and get them permitted and licensed and so forth.
All right, thank you.
Good. I think the other thing that's a big challenge for cities is that traditional local government processes tend to be a little bit convoluted. And I'm not speaking to any particular local government here, but here's an example of a permit application process chart from the city of San Francisco. And it literally requires 3 visits to different departments at the city, a waiting period, a plan review, and just a lot of bureaucracy to actually get a permit. And as you can imagine, as a casual host, going through that can just be very daunting. A lot of people choose to not even bother, which is also why a lot of cities have been struggling with getting compliance with the rules. So that was a little bit of context. Let's now switch gears and talk about our solution, or unless there are any questions to the challenges associated with enforcing short-term rental regulation.
Okay, Councilman Withers.
You may get to this a little bit later, but one of the challenges that we've been struggling with, in addition to identifying which properties are operating and whether or not they're permitted and remitting taxes, is tracking of complaints. Is that something that you'll address a little bit later in your presentation?
Absolutely.
Or? Okay.
Yeah,
thank you.
Absolutely, it's very important. So, on that note, I want to give you just a quick overview of what we do, and then we'll dive into each of them in more detail. And feel free to ask more questions after I've gone through the deep dive, because I probably will answer it otherwise. So to summarize, there are really 5 different things that we're doing for Nashville and will be doing. The first thing is the ongoing short-term rental address identification, where we scan all the sites every week in order to identify new listings, and then we go out and track them down. So that's the first thing. The second thing is we can do outreach on the city's behalf, working with the city and form letters and so forth, to essentially put all the notifications on autopilot. So instead of a city employee like looking at one list, looking at the other list, figure out who did we already send a letter to, what did the letter say, when do we need to follow up, we can do all that for the city in order to dramatically improve the efficiency and reduce the cost of doing that. The third thing we do is what we call rental activity monitoring and tax collection support, which is where we actually look at all these websites every week to look at to see if there are signs of rental activity. That we can then use to generate estimates of the number of nights occupied, as well as the taxable receipts, in order to make sure that people are paying their taxes and also not operating more than they're allowed to. The fourth thing we do is a hotline that we'll talk about in a little bit more detail. And this is to make it very easy for citizens and neighbors to log complaints and also get instant resolution to those complaints. And then the last thing is we have built some very sophisticated yet easy to use online and mobile permitting, tax registration, and tax collection systems that we could deploy. We are talking to the city about it. There are some questions about payment processors and like details like that that we should probably need to resolve in order to be able to do that. But again, this is something that can dramatically streamline the application process while at the same time making sure that everyone provide the right amount of information to the city. So that's a quick overview. I'm going to now give you a little bit more detail in each of them, and then feel free to ask questions as we go through this.
Okay, so you've got, if you go back to the slide, you've got an asterisk and there's something small in print. So we're checking everything. So what does that mean?
Yeah, no, so in order to do the online permitting and tax collection, we need to obviously collect funds, either for permitting fees or taxes. Our system is built on top of a payment processing platform called Stripe, which is a very popular, very modern payment processing technology that a lot of San Francisco, Silicon Valley-based companies use, including Amazon.com. The city currently has some kind of an agreement with another payment processor, and that might be a conflict if they can use another system for this. The problem is we can't go out and build our solution to customize it to every payment processor in the world, so we have chosen Stripe. But if we can get over that potential conflict, we would be more than happy to deploy our technology here in the city. And I think it would have some dramatic impacts in terms of both compliance and also reduce costs quite a lot.
So, and just trying to figure out all this stuff, in terms of the mobile online permitting, tax registration, tax collection, is that something that's in the contract with you all to do?
So it's part of our standard solution. So the city has subscribed to all of our services.
Okay.
And if it wants to deploy this part of the service, they can do that at no cost.
All right, but you can't do that. You can't do the first part, the mobile online permitting. Can you do the other two, the registration, tax collection, without Stripe?
As long as there's no payment involved, we could do that. But I would highly recommend that if there is an online system that you integrate a payment capability, because otherwise it becomes a very disjointed process. And generally, a lot of people won't complete the payment if you don't ask for the money right there when you actually try to get them registered.
Like, just so everybody knows, is this something we're all working on? Do you all know? Hold on, let me figure out which one that is. Okay, I got it.
Yes.
The answer is yes, you're working on it. Okay, all right. Thank you.
Cool. So to give you a little bit more details on the solution, and this is already live. So what you're seeing here is a screenshot I took a couple of weeks ago. We actually are up to a higher identification rate now. We have identified about 80% of the properties in Nashville. But what this is showing, and this is an online dashboard that the city can pull up anytime they want, 24/7, basically shows what's going on in terms of short-term vacation rentals in the city right now. So for example, right now it says that there is 4,689 active properties. So this is where we have deduplicated it for listings. So this is the actual number. You can see that 629 listings became active for the first time this month. And it just, again, speaks to this dramatic growth and turnover in the marketplace. We have identified at that point 77% of the properties. We're now at 80%. And then there's a number of other data points, including the split between different types of housing, apartments versus single-family homes, types of listings, if it's room rentals versus entire home rentals, and so forth. So all this stuff is available to the city 24/7, and it's updated constantly.
All right, so if you just kind of walk through that again, the 4,689. So, for example, when was this? Is this on a daily basis? You can get this?
This is updated, I wouldn't say daily, but probably every other day, at least once a week.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, based upon your analysis, whenever this was done,
Yeah.
there were 4,689 short-term rental properties.
Right.
When it says in or near the jurisdiction, are you talking about in Davidson County?
So this is, so what we're doing is we actually also analyzing a small border area around the cities and the county's jurisdiction in order to identify listings that you don't know when you look at them, whether or not they're on, so like one side or the other side of the city or county border. So, so the point is that before you do the identification, you don't know. At this point, we have already identified that, like, basically pretty much all of them are in the city. So I think the way I would think about this number is that there are 4,689 short-term rentals properties in the city's jurisdiction right now. By the way, there's about 7,500 listings, which you can see in that funnel below it. It's a little bit hard to see on the screen, but I can provide more details on that.
So, okay, so yeah, active short-term rental listings as of 2/24/17 were 5,761. Those are active listings.
Yeah. Now there's 7,500.
Now there's
listings. So this is the thing. This is a little confusing. So there's listings versus properties. A physical rental unit can have many listings. So a lot of people choose to take, for example, and list on Airbnb, let's call it Mr. BNB and VRBO. In that case, we don't want to double count those as properties, but we still think it's valuable information that everyone knows that there are this many listings. So we always generate data on multiple levels in order to explain what's going on. So to sort of like give you an idea about the growth in the market, on this slide here, I showed that in February there was 5,761 listings. Right now that number is about 7,500. So it's continuing to grow.
So you're probably going to have more listings than you are actual properties.
Yeah, always have much more listings. than
Okay,
properties.
which means because you might have one property and you might be listing in different places.
Exactly.
Okay, everybody got that? Okay,
Good.
okay. Now, so go back to, if you don't mind going back
Yeah.
to the slides. So 629 were,
New listings were added in the prior month. So this data is a couple of days old or maybe a week old or so. But the point is we scan all of these sites every week in order to identify new listings. We obviously store everything in our database. So we had found new listings that were basically unknown to us until recently, 629 this month.
but those are not new properties.
Not
those
new
are
properties.
listings.
We can give you the property count too. It's not on this particular dashboard though.
Okay, and then the 76.9,
Yeah, that's the percentage of properties that we have identified the address for. So that means what we do is we go out, scan all these websites, then we run a number of algorithms to identify clues as to where it's located. And then we actually have a large team of analysts look at that in order to do the sort of like matching between the listing and the exact street address. So you're not always able to find it. Sometimes, like, let's say, like there's no information on the listing, like basically a picture of a couch, and there's no name and no reviews and nothing. It becomes very difficult to figure out where it is. But we go through 3 different iterations. We have 3 different analysts look at anything before we sort of give up. And then we constantly look for updates to the listings as well. So as reviews are posted, people change the description, maybe add more pictures, we might learn more that will allow us to identify it. So we're doing a lot of that kind of stuff. We're also using a lot of artificial intelligence to look for patterns in writing, photos, and stuff like that.
so is that the 76.9, I mean, I assume this is actual data.
This is actual
Okay.
data, yeah.
So the 76.9, is that good? Is it
That's pretty
bad?
good. Yeah, it's actually good. I think when we talk to staff, I think the expectation we were going to get to about 70%. So, and we're actually at 80% now. I just checked with the team. So this number will continually increase, hopefully, as we learn more and get more and more data. You're never going to get to 100%. I mean, the best place we have is some of the ski resort towns in Colorado where we had maybe 94, 96% range. But those are easier because they're not a lot of multifamily homes. They're all single-family homes and large lots, and they're all distinctive architecture and things like that. Whereas, obviously, Nashville have a decent amount of multifamily housing, which is harder.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Good. The other thing we do is for every property that we find, we provide a report that explains how we did the matching between what we see online and what is essentially like known about the physical location. That includes a narrative and evidence to back up our matching. So in this particular case, it's hard to see on your screen, but there's 4 little pictures in the middle of the left side of the screen. Those show essentially listing photos and matching photos from third-party sources such as real estate websites and things like that to basically prove that this is the right property. We will also draw in a lot of other information such as permit information, white pages information, social media information, all sorts of stuff that can help us identify these properties. What we also do as part of this service is we take a screenshot of every listing every week. And we do that at a random time because we don't want people to start gaming the system by knowing that host compliance comes around every day at whatever, this time or that time. So we have sort of like a randomization algorithm that goes in and basically takes these screenshots, and every screenshot gets taken in full size. So you can see in the middle there is an example of one of these screenshots. It's a huge picture essentially that takes sort of like everything you'd see as you scroll down, including the reviews, the calendars, everything like that. And then we also timestamp it. So you can see on the right side is an example of the timestamp up in the top right corner. This is helpful for evidence purposes if there is ever a dispute with a homeowner about whether or not they were actually renting their property. And now you sort of have the evidence black on white. And we do this for every listing out there. All the information is also made available in a tabular format to the city Here's an example of what that looks like. Again, it's hard to see, but the point is that essentially think of it as a Excel sheet in the cloud with a lot of bells and whistles, where you can basically look at any property and see whether or not they're permitted and so forth, including the location, coordinates, and all that stuff. And all this information can be downloaded by city staff at their fingertips. You just click a few buttons, and then you can export it out of the system. In addition, we have the capabilities to run automated mailing campaigns. The way that works is that we work with city staff to develop a set of mailing criteria that we should apply. So the most typical mailing criteria is that when you find a non-permitted property, send them a letter. And here's an example of what that letter could look like. The letters can be customized. So for example, if a property is properly permitted, but doesn't have a tax registration, the letter can point that out, and vice versa. So we can run very granular criteria in order to make sure that that we give everyone the most targeted messaging that they need. We can also follow up automatically. So for example, if after a certain amount of time, let's say 2 or 3 weeks, people haven't responded to the initial letter by either getting a permit or taking down the listing, we can send them a follow-up letter and ask them to kindly do what they're supposed to do. And depending on the city's preferences, they can then change the tone of that letter or mention what the remedies are if they don't comply and so forth. So there is essentially, I call it like a small army of robots running in the background that figures out who needs to get what letters when, based on whatever criteria are defined by the city. The letters are sent on the city's letterhead. They are written by the city, and obviously we're happy to help craft them, but most cities already have very good letters, and we're happy to work with them. And what I think is important is that we highly recommend sending out letters as sort of like one city as opposed to having 5 different departments sending out letters. Because as a recipient, it can be confusing if you get one letter from one department telling you to do one thing, and then 2 days later you get another letter. So we always try to work with our clients to coordinate the efforts as much as possible. So that's a little bit about how that works. Any questions to that?
Councilor Allen?
Thank you. So you send out the first abate notice for someone who's not operating, who's operating without a permit, and I presume it would say, and you must stop listing right now. And then y'all have the wherewithal to then follow up and note and document letter sent on X day, received on day X plus 1, listing is still up on day X plus 2, that's a violation. When they go to the BZA, then all that information can be taken
Absolutely.
To the BZA as they make their decision about whether to make them certain.
All that information is captured in the system, and it's shown on that property page I showed you before with the screenshots and all that. There's actually a timeline for everything. So it says this letter was sent this date, the listing came up or down this date. And we do that for all the listings across all the different websites associated with that property.
Great. And then if, I presume you wait the 15 days that's written into our ordinance right now, and their listing is still up, then do y'all send the follow-up letter, or you turn? Okay, so
We'll
y'all
send the follow-up letter too. Yeah.
And so at what point do y'all then turn it over to? Poor Robert Osborne?
So it depends on the city's preferences. Like, we do not issue citations. We do not do sort of like field visits, right? We operate from the cloud, so to speak. So the way we normally partner with cities is that we do all the detective work, all the administrative work up front, so they can dedicate their time and resources to the stuff that really requires human sort of like intelligence and on-the-ground resources. And because of that, you can redeploy some resources in a better way and get better results. So generally, we will send out the first and second letter. We can send out third letters too if required, but when it gets to sort of like knocking on people's doors or placing liens and stuff like that, we defer to the cities.
Is there, and Councilor Allen, you may be able to help me with this, in terms of if this letter is sent out, can you send it out certified mail?
Yes, we can do that. There is an extra cost associated with that because the USPS charges, I think, $5 or $7 or something for it. But we can do that, and then we'll have the tracking information stored in the system so you know exactly when the letter was delivered and so on. That said, we've done a lot of testing, and this is part of our DNA. We always do what we call A/B testing. So every letter we send, we actually like to send multiple versions across our population. And what we have found is that when you send certified letters, you actually get less response than when you send first-class letters, because a lot of people basically refuse to sign for it because they know what it's going to say. And then you don't have any proof that the notice was delivered. So what we do in those cases is that we actually could send two letters. We could send a first class and a certified. And that way there's like basically no way to evade that problem. It's also important to know that in most cities, first class letters are considered due notice. So I'm not sure exactly about Nashville, but I believe that's the case here as well.
So I guess that was the question I was going to look at, Mr. Jameson. Is that in the statute? That just sending out the letter is considered notice, due notice? Okay.
Great. So that's what I would recommend doing. It's cheaper for the city, and you'll get better results. Okay. So any other questions for the mailing system and how we can help on that? Good.
Okay.
The third thing we do is the rental activity monitoring, and this is a service where we scan all the different websites for signs of rental activity in order to identify tax underreporting, tax fraud, and people not complying with the occupancy requirements. What this does is it allows us to quickly identify who may be forgetful or deliberately underreporting. So again, we can send letters automatically to people who seem to have been forgetful. Typically, the first letter will be a friendly reminder, like maybe you forgot something. And then if they still are forgetful, you can then follow up asking for more documentation. We also have some built-in systems that allow auditing a lot faster and more efficient. So essentially online platforms where people can upload documentation from the rental platforms in order to document their rental revenues. So all that stuff is part of the solution as well. We haven't implemented that here in Nashville at this point. We kind of like taking baby steps, like getting everyone registered and permitted, but this is something that we would definitely want to deploy as soon as possible. Any questions to this? Good. To address the question about the hotline, we have a line here in the city. It is very close to going live. We've been working with the 311 teams, actually integrating it in 311 as well. So there'll be sort of two ways to reach it, through the typical 311 system, as well as a dedicated phone number. So that way people don't have to go through too many phone trees to get there. The hotline is a little different from a traditional sort of call center in that it is highly automated in order to allow us to capture evidence or documentation of these alleged violations. Because one of the issues that you very easily run into when there is a nuisance is that it's very hard to prove after the fact what actually happened. And then it becomes a he said, she said situation. And at the end of the day, like as a code enforcement officer, you don't necessarily have time to go out and do like forensic investigation work on these kind of issues. So what we've done is we built a system where people who can call in will be asked if they have any evidence that they would be willing to share with the city of this alleged violation. This could be, for example, photos of the incident. It could be video recordings. It can be audio recordings. It could be screenshots, whatever it may be. By giving people the ability to share this with the city, you end up getting a much better case, which is what you need in order to potentially go after the few bad apples out there. What is also a part of the solution is an ability to automatically reach out to the designated contact or emergency contact person for the registered property in real time. So when we get a call, we will cross-reference the address with the data that we have on file. So if it's a registered property and they have given a emergency contact, we'll automatically call that number immediately after we receive the complaint and notify them that we received the complaint and ask them to kindly deal with it. We also notify them that if they do not respond to this in a timely manner, that may in of itself be a violation of the ordinance. We also tell them that it will be escalated if they don't respond. And then we can actually call back the complainant also and ask after 30 minutes or so if the issue has been resolved. So there's a lot of sort of like built-in feedback loops and accountability, which is super helpful.
Yeah, Castelli.
Two separate questions. One, to our legal folks over there, the information that they're capturing is one of the things we've been missing. When we have that, how can it be used? Does the person still have to show up, or can Metro then say, this is our evidence and we're coming to environmental court with this evidence? So that saves the neighbor from the burden of having to then show up in court. That is super. Okay, great. I like that answer. And then second question is, can you work, I mean, and one of the other things is, it's great if you make them be quiet that night, but the fact that it got loud, in my mind, needs to count as one of those 3 strikes and you're out. So do you have the capability to make a note, there was a problem, we documented that it was loud, they fixed it, but this is still one of their 3 strikes, and now they know not to have 2 more. Can we make it work that way?
Right. So we will report every address that has received noise complaints or issues. We'll even categorize the type of complaints. We don't make a subjective judgment whether or not this should count as a strike or not. We'll leave that to city employees to make that determination. Right. But we will record the conversation and give them all the evidence. Okay. And give the phone number of the complainant if the complainant is willing to provide that to the city, so they can call and follow up. So the point is, we try to serve up all the information needed on a silver plate, including timestamps and recordings of every conversation. Okay, so if they send a recording, that gets connected to it at that point. Great, thank you.
Okay, so I'm looking for people with other questions here. All right, so step 1, concerned neighbor calls. It's a 24/7 short-term rental hotline. Other cities have this at this point?
Yeah, we're doing this in a number of places.
And how do they get the number out? In most locations, how do people know what number to call?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. There are really 3 ways. One is that most cities post it on their website. So the City of Nashville has a short-term rental related section of the website. My recommendation would to make a very prominent call out in the top right that basically says, if you have an issue with a short-term rental, please call this number. Or you can also report it online. There's also an online form for doing the same thing. The other way that the word gets out is generally as part of the launch of our services. We recommend that there is a press release, and essentially the city reaches out to the local media and tell about these new initiatives and make sure that people are aware of it, so if they ever experience an issue, they know that there is a solution to it. Third, we can also make notifications to neighbors if the city wants to. It's not part of our standard service, but I mean, we know where every property is, and if the city wanted to, we could send a letter to everyone within a certain radius and basically say, if you ever have an issue, call this number. Again, this is not part of our standard service, but we have the capability to do these kinds of things.
So part of the question would be, not everybody has access to a computer, and people may not have access at 3 o'clock in the morning or whatever. And so the question is, do you know of any cities that you're working with that require some type of posting of that, not necessarily you notifying, but a posting of the 1-800 number or whatever number is to be called, so that people, they really are looking for it, they know exactly where to find it? Yeah,
no, that is definitely a solution. There are some cities that have that posting requirement as part of the ordinance. That said, it is a double-edged sword, right? Because you also want to be careful you don't change this sort of like look and feel of the neighborhood by having signs everywhere. So it's also, it only worked for the ones that are permitted and registered. A lot of times the people who are operating the most egregious sort of party houses are the ones that basically lost their permit already. So they probably wouldn't be the ones that would post something on the outside of the house. But it's not a bad idea, but you need to think about the pros and cons if you go that route.
Got it. Okay, step 2, if somebody is taking a picture or getting video, some type of other, I assume that's something that we would put into some form of our code. The question is, how are they going to, what are they supposed to do with it when they actually take the picture? Where are they sending it?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So how it works is when you call our hotline number, we will ask a question, and that the question is like, would you be willing to share any photo, video, or other evidence with the city? If they say yes, then we will ask them for a cell phone number or an email address. that we can essentially send a link to. That's a unique link. When you click on that, it takes you to like a little beautiful upload screen. It works really pretty on a phone. So basically, you just choose what pictures or videos that you have in your phone memory, and it just gets uploaded instantly. If you're on a computer, it's the same thing. You basically like say what files do I want to upload and so forth. It is all electronic. We do not have the ability to sort of collect evidence from mail or anything like that. But I think in this day and age, pretty much everyone has a cell phone, and if they don't have it, maybe they have friends that have that would be willing to share this kind of stuff.
Okay, so now the next step 3, if property is registered, host compliance immediately calls host to seek resolution. All right, so I get that part, but maybe it's a 2-part question. You call the host to seek resolution, the host doesn't answer. What happens?
Yeah, no, so we record the fact that they didn't answer. A lot of times the ordinance require that the host is actually going to pick up the phone. So we'll record the fact that they didn't pick up the phone. In some cities, that actually counts as a strike in and of itself. The way we do that is when we call the number of the host, we'll actually, like, after they pick up, we'll ask them to press a 1 to, like, actually confirm it. And that way we know that it wasn't just a voicemail. So that's sort of how that works. Sorry, there was a second part of the question.
Well, I guess, okay, so let's say you call once. Do you make a second call? Is it just one call?
We just make one call.
Okay.
I mean, it's, again, it's a strike between sort of like efficiency and like how you want to do it. We have set it up to do one call, and I think that's probably what most people think is appropriate, especially because the person who is listed as the emergency contact is supposed to be available for these kinds of issues. What we also can do is we can automatically place a call to the original complainant 20, 30, whatever minutes after the initial call, and we'll just ask them if the issue has now been resolved. And again, they press 1 if it's been resolved. Otherwise, they press 2, and then it gets forwarded to either the police non-emergency line, or if code enforcement happens to have 24/7 staffing, it can go there.
Okay, so property is not registered, so you don't have a place to call. What do you do with that?
Yeah, so we record, obviously, the address, the evidence, the call, everything gets there, but it just doesn't initiate the call out. So now city staff, when they come into the office Monday morning, they can now see that we received a complaint about address XYZ, but also see that no calls were placed because it was not a registered property. So they'll know, and now obviously this is probably a prime suspect for further investigation, right?
Right, but you still got the problem with the complainant who is having a problem. Is there also a phone call made either to the police or to the codes enforcement to try to deal with it, even though you've got a non-permitted property?
Yeah, so we do not do that because the issue is also there's also like house parties in non-short-term rentals, right? And the thing is, if we were to get a call from just like a random frat house, we don't necessarily like need to sort of like call that a short-term rental unless it is. So again, it's a sort of like a balance. Like we don't want to be the city's sort of like noise complaint line in general. This is a short-term rental related hotline. That's what we're trying to do. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I just trying to figure out what you do in that situation for people who are, there's some wild party that's going on, and they're sitting there going like, well, that's great. There's a wild party going on, and it's also a non-permitted property, which isn't going to be dealt with until maybe Monday or Tuesday, if that soon, and you've got a problem. So I'm just kind of walking through all the different scenarios.
No, it's a good question. I'm not sure there is a perfect solution to that because we don't really know if it's a short-term rental until we further investigate, and that unfortunately takes a little bit of time. We can't do that in real time in the middle of the night. So that's the issue. And even if it turned out to be a short-term rental, we still don't have anyone to call, right? Because we don't know the phone number of the host until they register. So it's just a hard problem to actually address.
All right.
So I mean, so actually, there is one idea.
Okay.
And Airbnb supposedly have their own hotline. We would be open to figuring out a way to forward calls to them and say, we received this call, we think it's an Airbnb listing. Do you want to deal with that in real time? Because they obviously have the phone number. This would require some collaboration, and also we can't do this with every platform because, to my knowledge, only Airbnb has a hotline at this point. HomeAway might have one too, but most of the platforms don't. So this is something we'd be very interested in working with them on, and generally be very open to partnering and working with the platforms to solve any problem there is. But it does require them to agree to it, obviously.
Other questions from council members? Oh, Councilman Hager.
Get this open. I got to go back to some of these other questions about this. You said you got 76.9% identified right now. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Are you through with your full evaluation or not?
So we're not finished. We constantly do it, right? I mean, every week new listings come online, so we'll continue to look at everything. And I think just the last couple of days we added probably, I think 300 listings we looked at the last couple of days. So I think the number will go to about 80% the next day or so. Again, we'll never get to 100% if that's what you're asking.
And I'm assuming the way your program works, it looks for words that tee you off that it's a short-term rental. Is that correct?
No, that's actually not what we do. What we do is we look at all the sites that are short-term rental websites, right? And then you can look there pretty quickly. Like if you listed an Airbnb and you're renting for less than 30 days, per definition, you're a short-term rental, soliciting business as a short-term rental. So we scan all the different websites that are known for short-term rentals.
Okay. What if somebody sets up their own website?
Yeah, if they've set up their own little website, it will be hard for us to find them because we obviously don't know about it. The good news is that in sort of this internet age, if you set up your little website, no one is going to find you because just like we can't find them, no one else is going to find them. So in our experience, it is moving to marketplaces, just like eBay now. I mean, no one sells random junk off their own website, right? You go to eBay, and that's just where sellers and buyers meet, and that's kind of what's happening with the short-term vacation rentals too.
The reason I'm asking that is because I know there will always be somebody that tries to get around this. And I was wondering if your program picked up on wording that would locate an illegal short-term rental.
Right. I mean, we could definitely crawl the internet more broadly, but you're going to get a lot of false positives. So I think, again, what we've seen is that, for example, Craigslist used to be a place where people would do a lot of vacation rentals, but because of Airbnb and HomeAway and all these different sites, that's becoming much less prevalent because there's a lot of risk to renting through a platform like Craigslist or even if it's a private website. One, it could be a fraud. There's lots of examples of people taking pictures of nice houses on golf courses, putting them up on the internet and then say, please send a check. And then it turns out that the house either doesn't exist or it's not their house and the poor guy shows up. So I think what that means is that as a potential renter of these properties, you actually gravitate towards the platforms because it gives you some security and safety that you're not going to be defrauded or potentially get into an unsafe situation. So I think it's just sort of one of these things that happen with the internet. Things tend to basically move towards marketplaces.
And what I understand, you've already got it in Asheville, North Carolina, correct?
That's correct.
And then I looked at one in Charleston. Do you deal with Charleston?
Charleston, not now. I wish we were. We were talking to them.
Okay. And what I'm reading in some of their regulations, they don't, what I read is they don't have the non-owner occupied in the residential areas. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I'm not an expert in Charleston because it is not a client of ours, but from what I remember, they do have zones, so the tourist zones downtown, there are residential zones, there are different rules depending on those. In the residential zones, you have to be an owner in order to actually be allowed to rent. In the downtown areas, I do think they allow non-hosted and non-owner occupied houses.
Do you ever catch anybody advertising on Craigslist or some of those venues?
So at this point, we do not scan Craigslist. And again, that's sort of two reasons for that. One is that the data is very unstructured there. You can't really analyze it the same way as you can on the other sites. Second thing is that fewer and fewer people are doing it. So as a sort of percentage of the market, it's becoming negligible. It's really not a big part of the market. And we obviously focus on the places where there are a lot of activity.
All right. And how many companies are there that do the short-term rentals that you know about?
Who does what we do?
Yeah, the ones y'all scan, how many?
How many websites?
Websites,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
So we are aware of 125 different sites. Right now scanning 22. We're going to expand that list to about 50 over the next couple of months. And that's, again, as the market is fragmenting, we feel we need to go broader. There is a long tail of sites that have maybe a few hundred or a few thousand listings across the world. In the grand scheme of things, they don't really matter. Like Airbnb has like 2 million, for example. So we try to focus on the sort of like bigger fish, but we are going pretty far down that list in order to always be on top of it.
There's 122 type websites.
125,
that
yeah.
do short term. And y'all do how many right now?
So we do 22 right now. We're expanding to 50.
All right. Thank you.
Other questions from council members? So, Mr. Benzer, let me ask you this. You've got, it looks like you've got about 13 cities, and you may have more than that you actually are doing business with.
Oh, we have 70.
70.
Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of maybe a percentage, you talked about calling, when you get to step 3 or step 4, calling someone. How many of those cities have some type of special codes enforcement that you would call instead of the police?
None.
None?
Yeah.
So
It's
you
also
always call the police?
So most of the clients that we work with are cities that do not have 24/7 code enforcement staffing, because it's a very costly service to have. Nashville is obviously one of the bigger cities, and you also are known for being a fun place to visit. So therefore, I could see a lot of reasons why it might make sense to have a 24/7 staffing in Nashville. But in most of the cities we work with, they're not of the same scale or sophistication, so they don't have it, which is one of the other reasons why our service is so valuable.
So I guess I'll follow up, and then I'll go to Councilor Lady Allen. The question is, so you're always, in terms of that second call, if you've got a permitted property, but you got a problem going on, you're always calling the police?
So it's only when there's an escalation, right? So what we do is we are the first line of defense. So I would say maybe less than 0.5% of the calls actually end up going to the police. Right? Most of the issues gets resolved by us because of us calling the owner of the property, or the complaining not willing to basically escalate it. Like people use judgment, right? There's sometimes it's worth calling the police, and there's sometimes it's not worth calling the police. Even though we always call the non-emergency, we never call 911, right? We always call the sort of like local phone number of the police. A lot of people feel hesitant, like, okay, it wasn't that big a deal. I kind of vented, I left the message, I provided the documentation, but let's not sort of like bother anyone anymore at this point. And it sort of therefore serves as a filter as well, so you save a decent amount of calls to the police because of this.
So last question on this one is, do you all have, you said 5%?
0.5%.
0.5%?
Yeah, very low. Right? Yeah, most issues are resolved sort of like relatively easily.
So out of 100%, not 1%, but less than that?
I would say very, very few. I don't have the numbers in front of me. It will probably also be different. I could imagine Nashville will probably have a higher percentage because, again, there is a decent amount of sort of party houses here compared to other places we operate. So we'll look at the data and happy to provide more reporting on it as we sort of get this implemented.
Okay. Councilor Lady Allen.
Thank you. Just to follow up with that, based on your experience so far, can you point to cities that are doing a good job with their follow-up, just in terms of being able to get rid of bad actors? Because 2 years ago when you and I talked, I said, I don't need the data because we can't deal with the data that we've got already. And we've put a lot of great things in place, so I think we're going to be much better at it now, and it's time to bring your services in. But I'm just wondering if you've seen other cities that now when you gather that data and hand them to it, who's being really effective in then making a positive change with the problem properties?
Yeah, so there are two that comes to mind. One is San Luis Obispo County in California. It's a county on the central coast, and they have a lot of vacation rentals, especially in the summer, and people tend to come there with large groups and have a good time. So we have had our service running there for a while, and the result is that the bad guys get shut down. I mean, it really works pretty easy, right? Another example is Estes Park, Colorado, which is a vacation rental area close to Rocky Mountain National Park, just north of Denver. Same thing, like a lot of second homes there, a lot of big groups, and because of the data, they've been able to do something about it and essentially deal with the few bad actors. Because one of the things that you'll find and it might be different percentages in Nashville, but most of the people who do short-term vacation rentals are very respectful. Like, they do it in a way where it's not really creating a lot of nuisances. There are a few people who do not operate that way, and we build a solution that allows the city to quickly figure out who they are and do something about it. So the county is called San Luis Obispo County,
San Luis Obispo.
and I can give you contact information after. Yeah. Okay.
Okay,
Good.
all right, you can proceed.
Want to just move on quickly, just talk a little bit about this potential thing we could do, just to give you a sense of what it is, right? So, as I mentioned, one of the big areas where there's opportunity for improving compliance is making it easier to get people to essentially go through the registration and permitting process, as well as paying their taxes. In our experience, if you ask people to go through too many hoops, fill out too many PDF forms, print out, go down with checks to City Hall, a lot of people just sort of like fall through the cracks. It just becomes too difficult. So what we've tried to do is build a system where we minimize data entry, because we sort of using data we already have to pre-fill information. So for example, here's an example from one of our clients. They require the parcel number of the property as one of the points that they want to know when they do this. And the good news is, when you know the parcel number, you know a lot of stuff about this property. You also know the address. You also know the owner. So you just saved yourself a lot of data entry. So what we try to do is always essentially pre-fill forms, validate forms, and so forth, in order to make it so easy that you can actually fill out this stuff on a little phone screen. The same with the payment. Because of the Stripe technology we use, it's completely integrated. It's like as easy as paying on like Amazon.com. It's not like pop-ups and like security issues and stuff like that. It's really, really streamlined. And this is something that I would love to talk to the city and county about potentially implementing here, because I think it could potentially be a big boost to registration rates. Okay. That was what I had for the presentation. Obviously got a lot of questions. Happy to answer any other questions there may be, and also talk about other issues that might be sort of like on your mind as it relates to short-term rentals.
So questions from council members? I do see there's a couple pages in the back. Did you want to get into that?
It was more of a meant as an appendix. I don't know if you want to go there, because obviously my job is not to dictate policy in any way, shape, or form. If there were questions about what I'm seeing in terms of best practices out there, I'm happy to share that in terms of regulation. But I know that, I mean, Councilmember Allen and other people are sort of like the world experts in this as well, so it might be sort of not that interesting.
If you don't mind, why don't you run through those last two slides, and then what I'd like to do is reserve a little bit of time for people in the back, if they have some questions, to actually be allowed to ask as well.
Perfect. Right. So again, it's very important that I make it clear that we are not here to dictate policy. Like, we are here to help city enforce whatever policies that their elected officials and other stakeholders want to enact. That said, we do see a lot of ordinances, and we also have a lot of data on what works and what doesn't work. And as a result, a lot of people come and ask us, what are you seeing out there? Wanted to just put a couple of thoughts on paper, just so you can think about it. One of the big issues that's obviously risen in last couple of years about short-term rentals is, like, how does it impact housing affordability, availability of long-term rentals? And you can have a big academic discussion about it. I think if you just use common sense, you'll probably conclude that it must have an impact at the end of the day. The question is then, what are you going to do about it? Some places have put in place like very complicated rules that says you're only allowed to rent this many days a year, and if you rent it like this and that, then you can do it, and it becomes very difficult to enforce. What I've seen work really well, though, is if you instead say, okay, if we don't want commercial operators to operate in certain parts of town because we potentially think that they're taking away long-term housing, let's just make it simple and say you can only get a permit if you're actually the permanent resident of that place. So that's something that has worked really well in a lot of places. You guys have that in some parts of town, I believe, or at least thinking about it. And this is what I'm seeing in most places now. So Denver has it, Los Angeles is going to adopt it, Seattle's going to adopt it. It sort of becomes like the best practice. The other concern, obviously, about housing affordability is that there are some cities where the city or the state or county subsidizes housing. And you probably don't want to see people who are getting the benefit of subsidized housing also then like turning around and renting it out full-time on short-term rental websites. And the easy solution is just writing it into the ordinances that's like explicitly disallowed. And if you do it, you could lose basically that subsidized housing unit.
Councilman Withers.
Thank you so much for addressing the issue of housing availability, which is many of us would identify as a crisis here in Nashville, as it is in a lot of other major cities. I was wondering if you could clarify a little bit more about your first bullet point for the best practices for only allowing permanent residents to operate short-term rentals. When you, we've had some discussion about what is a corporation as a person versus a natural person. I guess my first aspect would be how have you seen that interpreted in other cities to determine what is a permanent resident? And the second piece of that would be, do cities that do that well limit residents to operating only in their permanent residence, or do they allow a permanent resident of the city to also operate a non-owner occupied elsewhere? There's a couple different approaches, but there's a lot of nuance that we've been exploring in this committee on those topics.
Absolutely. So to address both, the way I think the most cities that have been successful look at this issue is as like real people. Like a corporation in their mind is not a person and can't, per definition, live anywhere. So it's not if you have the headquarters there you're allowed to do it. It's really about where do you go home and sleep every night. Obviously, you want to give people who work, for example, like in the airline industry, an opportunity to be away a certain amount of nights every year and still be able to rent out, because that makes a lot of sense. But the point is, this is their home. That's sort of how they try to do it. The way they then enforce it is that they then require certain documentation as part of the permitting process. And this is something that should be done on an annual or at least every other year kind of basis. So kinds of things that are required would be like voter registration. It could be utility bills, bank statements, what is listed on people's state-issued ID, like driver's licenses, and other things like that, where you essentially like make certain efforts to make sure that people are not essentially claiming something as a residence that's not. To address your second question, another simple way or good way to do it is that you only allow any person to have one property per definition. You can't have two primary residencies, like, because it's called primary for a reason, right? So, so that would be the way to deal with that. And in that way, at least, like, even if they defraud you on one, they can't do it a second time around, right? So that's a good idea. So we have a lot of thoughts about how to implement that without making it a bureaucratic nightmare. I'm happy to talk to you about how that could be done. Did that address your questions? Okay. To just continue the bullet points here, another objective that's often raised is how do you preserve the neighborhood character and the fabric of the neighborhood? And there are sort of different ways of doing that, also depending on what you're trying to accomplish. If you're concerned about essentially a whole neighborhood turning into a tourist area, one way to do it is that you basically put quotas on how many short-term rentals are allowed in that area. It does require some complexity, and there's also questions about fairness, right? Because at the end of the day, like, if you happen to get one of these like coveted permits, it's kind of like a license to operate and set prices. You have to think about how to make that fair and equitable, but it's definitely something to consider. If you're concerned about what the neighborhood actually looks like, less about who's coming and going in it, but like you don't want it to turn into Disneyland, then you can have some rules about you can't change the exterior look and feel of the house. You can't put up like neon signs that says like the world's best Airbnb or whatever, right? Things like that. So that's some of the most common sort of methods used for that. If it's about protecting quality of life of residents, a number of things, and it also depends on what your issues are. But for example, if parking is an issue, a lot of cities require that there is a number of dedicated on-site parking spots that corresponds to the number of bedrooms. So for example, if you have a 4-bedroom house, you actually need to have maybe 4 parking spots. Or some places it's like 1 plus something for every other bedroom or stuff like that, so formulas. And that's helpful because otherwise what happens is people, when they rent these big houses, they tend to bring in a lot of people and a lot of cars, and it can totally like overflow into the neighborhood and become a problem for the permanent residents. If the issue is about noise, a common way to deal with that is sort of like inserting 2 clauses into the ordinance. One is that on any interior door, or exterior door on the inside, there has to be essentially a little printout of the noise ordinance. And the city could even go out and like maybe write up a sort of like Reader's Digest version of that, like the Cliff Notes, that just says if it's after 10 p.m., you can't be outside making noise or whatever the rules are. That can sometimes help deter so like people make a lot of noise outside. The other thing is that they can actually require that it gets written into the house rules and the contract. So in, for example, Airbnb, there's a section that says house rules, and that's also part of the contract. And for example, some cities say that you need to post the following language, and that includes that you can't be making noise and disturb the neighbors. And that way, at least you're giving the renters due notice that like you take this seriously, so they shouldn't be surprised if that becomes an issue. Another way to deal with these sort of emergencies or nuisances is to require a local contact person. And it depends on how your community is, but some places says it's someone who's just reachable, essentially 24/7 during the rental period. Others says it has to be someone who is literally local, has to be able to get there within a certain amount of time. It kind of depends on the neighborhood, like, or the kind of community. Like if you're a vacation rental destination, like a mountain resort, having someone being able to get there in 20 minutes may not be reasonable because most people are like second homeowners. But in a place like Nashville, especially if the hope is that you have local people renting out their homes, having a local contact person may make more sense. To sort of think about it from the flip side, there are also certain communities that actually really want to encourage short-term rentals in certain parts of town, for example. So there might be areas of town that are sort of like redeveloping, and it would actually be a good thing to get more tourists and money into those parts of town. In that case, you could actually make special zones where maybe the requirements for operation are different and easier to get a permit. And also there's the places where they actually exempt short-term rentals from certain rules during certain time periods. So for example, if there's a football game in town, like the Super Bowl, it's maybe all about getting as many rentals on the market because there's not enough hotel rooms in the city. Lastly, if safety is an issue, there's sort of like 2 ways to go. One is a self-certification process where you basically, as part of the permitting, require people to sign an affidavit that says that there is proper egress. So if there's a fire, people can get out, that there is carbon monoxide detectors, there's smoke alarms and other things like that. Some cities go as far as actually require a physical inspection. Those are typically cities that already have a rental inspection program. So if the city inspects all long-term rentals, there is a case to be made why the same requirement should apply to short-term rentals, because the whole idea is you have people coming that essentially need some extra protection because they don't really have an option to go anywhere else if this doesn't work out. So those are things to consider. That said, if you do require physical inspections, you've got to make sure that you can actually do it in a timely manner. It's not fair to the citizens to require inspections and then tell them that it's going to take 9 months before like they can get that done. So you need to make sure that your broad organization is equipped to handle that additional volume. And there's also a cost to that you need to think about. So those are some thoughts on that. Any questions on that?
Yeah, Councilor Vercher.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have specific questions related to your appendix. I kind of had to let the information stew a little bit. I want to go back to steps 1, 2, 3, and 4, and I'm sitting here trying to just map through the process of it. So step one, obviously they call. Step two, the complaint is captured for evidence. Step three, host compliance. Y'all determine whether or not if it's registered or not registered. This is also the point where a callback can be initiated or requested, but it's at this juncture. And then step four, if it needs to be escalated, this is the step where it happens also. Where's the connect to our codes department where the notification is sent, one? Two, if it's resolved on you guys' end, does our codes department still send a notification, or is the complaint closed, thus making the due process part of it closed? So they would have to call all over again and start with step one. I'm just trying to figure out the workflow, because neighbors are wanting a real solution in this. And if we don't have our workflow piece streamlined, your software, all you end up becoming is software just capturing information. You end up just becoming another repository for information that we already have on another system. So can you,
Yeah.
I don't know if we've gotten to that point where we've mapped out the workflow, the connecting piece between host compliance and codes. That's my first, that's that question. I'm gonna give them all to you at the same time. I don't like feeding people applesauce. The other one is, I was going back to the services on the initial part. So you're saying you're listing or you're scanning, whatever your terminology is, for you to track down STRs on these websites. You have 99% of the universe, of the STR universe, which is 22 websites, but there's 125. So that's 18% of the universe, right? That's not 99% of the universe.
Do you want me to address it now or later?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, so this is about market shares, right? I mean, it's just like there's probably hundreds of companies that make soft drinks, right? But Coca-Cola and Pepsi are 90% of the market at the end of the day, if you terms like how many bottles are sold every day, right? It's the same with short-term vacation rental websites. Airbnb is about 45% market share. All the companies under Expedia about 30, 40%. TripAdvisor owns 7 different sites that make about like 10, 15%, right? So right there you have a huge amount of the market, right? And then we sort of like take a few sites and add them to get to the 99%. The thing is, there's a long tail of like small sites that are sort of like Me Too sites that are trying to come into the market, and they're gaining more and more market share, right? So now, because it is so hard to show up on the first page in Airbnb and these other sites, they are growing a lot. So we see sites for people who are like game day rentals, which is people just going to football games. There are like a site called Mr. B&B, which is a gay version of Airbnb. There are sites for people with kids that travel with kids where the house is specifically set up for that. You have all these different websites, but since they all cater to sort of like smaller populations and niches, they tend to be much smaller in terms of volume. So that's why the list is so long, while covering the first 22 gets you to 99% of the market.
So with the 22, we'll get a good return on that.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You get essentially the whole market, like for more practical purposes.
That's really what I was trying to boil down to. Okay.
Yeah, that's it. Good. Did you want me to address your first question as well? So the question about how we connect the hotline to the city's codes department. So for every service that we provide, there is a real-time dashboard available in the cloud. It can be accessed from any web browser. So even if the codes employer is not in the office, they can access the sort of up-to-date minute-by-minute reporting on what's going on. So therefore, when they come into the office or want to check in, they can basically pull up and filter by date and say, okay, here are the complaints we received. In addition, we send an email notification in real time whenever we get a complaint, we send an email notification to whatever email address that the city wants us to notify, and basically says, we've received this complaint about this address, here's the evidence, here's the recording and all that stuff. So if someone is on call and wants to quickly like figure out if there's something that requires or like further escalation, they can just listen to the recording there. There's a little report where we type up notes from our conversation with the complainant. So they don't have to sort of like go through the whole thing. So they get an instant notification as well as the reporting that can be accessed in whenever they want to.
Okay. Councilor Allen.
I want to follow up on that great question. So when we get to 3 violations, which our code says is grounds for possible revocation of permit, is that flagged by y'all and then you let codes know? How does that process work?
Yeah, no, so we can run reports that will basically show how many violations or how many complaints has been received by property. We'll do that by address and parcel number. So it will be very easy for the city staff to figure out who are the ones that received a number of complaints. They'll obviously have to look and see if any of those complaints are frivolous, right? So there has to be some kind of a scoreboard where every complaint is essentially validated and confirmed for like reasonableness. But the data is there. It's very easy to work with.
Yeah. Councilman Hager.
I want to go back to, I know Mr. Jameson said something about the evidentiary issues, and understand what you're saying is people can send these pictures in and things of that nature, but how are those pictures going to be qualified if it goes to court? Maybe Mike can answer that question, because you'd still have to have that person there that takes that picture to introduce that as evidence.
Yeah, Mike, I've got your microphone turned on.
But if they're regularly engaged with the codes department or with Mr. Herbert, that's the regular business activity. All it does, however, is allow the admission into evidence. That doesn't mean it goes unchallenged, and without a neighbor there to back it up, that's a weakness. But
Well, that's what I'm asking. It can be challenged.
Absolutely, but it's admissible.
And that was the other question I got with the Business Records Exception Act. You still have to have an affidavit signed by the keeper of those business records. Who's going to do that?
You can do that holistically one time.
Okay. And who would do that? Them? That's all I know.
Councilman Swope.
Thank you for being here, Mr. Binzer. Great presentation, by the way. One question, and I don't know if it's part of the program that you have going with the city right now or not, but it's something we're talking to with Airbnb and HomeAway and VRBO and all of them. If you find, or if you get a complaint on a non-permitted property, and it's 2 o'clock in the morning, are you as a company willing to notify, and you know that's an Airbnb listing, but you also realize it's an unpermitted property that we haven't gotten to yet, are you willing to notify Airbnb to have them yank that off the site?
Happy to. Yeah, I mean, I think the more we can collaborate with the platforms, the better the system will be. So any kinds of collaboration like that, we would be very, very open to, as long as they are. I think that's the bigger question.
Perfect. Thank you.
Councilor Vercher. It's kind of.
Is that part of our service agreement? Is that more money or, okay.
I mean, it's a free, so this is the thing. I think it's important. Like, so we constantly sort of like build on our services and improve them and come up with new ideas. And because we are working as a software as a service, it's almost like a subscription, right? So the idea is like we release new features all the time. We don't charge for that, right? It's just part of the program. And I think that's also one of the reasons why I think this city decided to go with us is we have been very innovative and continue to innovate. So whenever something new comes out in this industry, we will probably be the first ones to figure it out. And I meet with all these platforms on a monthly basis. Like we know exactly what's going on there.
Okay, if you don't mind, go through your last slide for us, and then we're going to spend a few minutes and see if anybody in the audience has any questions. Okay, so I think you had one last slide, the smart enforcement strategy.
Sorry. Yeah, no, so this is it's pretty obvious, but like it is worth pointing out nonetheless. And the thing is, you can come up with the best ordinance in the world, but if you don't have a thoughtful and sort of like effective mechanism for dealing with violations, it doesn't really matter. And I think that's where a lot of short-term rental ordinances have fallen short in the past across the country. It is getting better because I think people like us and cities just learning and being smarter about it. But what is really important is that you think it through down to the details, and I think some of you brought up the importance of doing that. So, for example, what should be the process for dealing with complaints and violation reports? Like, there got to be like a standard process for dealing with that within the city and scoring them and see, is this a strike or not a strike? What's going to be a process for revoking permits? Like, there has to be a standard operating procedure. Everyone needs to know exactly what to do when. You need to make sure you don't put so much bureaucracy and red tape in the process that no one ever actually gets there. Because, like, for example, New Orleans is a very, I would say, strong due process, sure. And people just speculate in it because they basically know that's going to take the city 3 years to shut them down. And by then they made their money and gone, right? What are you going to do about people who list without like having a permit, right? You need to write into the ordinance that that is actually a violation, and then you follow up. You need to make sure that you set fine amounts that are actually a real deterrent without being punitive. So, for example, West Hollywood, which is one of our clients, have come up with a very innovative way to do this, where they say, actually, let's just do the fines as a multiple of your nightly rate. So when you rent out like this mansion for $2,000 a night, you know what? We're going to make the fine 3x that for the first violation, 5x for the second, 10x for the third, right? And maybe you can't do that, but if you could, it would be really helpful. State law might. Okay, that's too bad. But again, see if there are other ways that you can say daily fines, for example. So basically, every night that you're advertising, maybe that's a violation. That's it? All right, I'm sorry. Okay, so anyway, so there's some things, but like as much as you can do, maybe you then have multiple violations. So advertising is one, renting is another, right. Like getting a complaint is a third. I mean, somehow where you can essentially make sure that there are some real deterrent in not following those rules. And then as it comes to taxes, again, you need to actually do some audits once in a while and make sure that people don't sort of like learn that you're never going to look at it, because if they do, some people will start speculating in it. So it's just like any other ordinance. If you want the rules to actually be effective, you do need to sort of like follow through on the enforcement side. So just some thoughts. Good.
Mr. Bencher, that was very good. Let me, any questions from council members? Yeah. Councilman Withers.
Well, thank you for this presentation. It was very helpful, and I think frankly, for folks on both sides of this issue, everyone is or purports to be in favor of enforcement of the rules. We'll see how that goes sometimes, but I really am impressed by the complaint reporting and documentation procedures. We do have some struggles with our ability to assess fines from the courts, or even, frankly, getting courts to uphold our ordinance. So we have a lot of challenges there that may make our own enforcement ability somewhat limited. One thing that I am really interested in getting your perspective on is a frequent claim that is made, or an assertion that's made, is that cities that ban short-term rentals, that just causes that activity to go underground. And just want to state again for the record that no one in Nashville is promoting an idea that we're going to ban short-term rentals entirely. There is legislation that's being considered that would phase out non-owner occupied permits in residential zoning over a number of years. So it's not a ban at all. It is a phase out. And even one of your best practices that it be to actual residents, which our ordinance that's been proposed would follow that best practice. But if you could speak a little bit about what your experience has been like from just a data standpoint about listings and number of properties being listed after cities have enacted some of your best practices. Has that compliance moved in a certain direction? I think that would be really helpful to our discussion.
Absolutely. So I'll give you a couple of data points. So the City of Denver implemented an ordinance in January of this year that has a number of the things we talked about here, like there's a local contact, there's a permanent residence requirement, and so forth. They also implemented our tool, and we are now at, I think, 65% compliance, which, I mean, to the outside world, that doesn't sound that impressive, but if you actually study short-term rental compliance across other cities, that's astronomical, right? So San Francisco, for example, has been trying to drive compliance with their ordinance for years. They have a whole office set up specifically dedicated to this with, like, I can't remember, 8 or 9 people, and they had like 15% compliance, right? So the point is that in Denver, they do that with a part-time person. Whitney is in charge of the entire program. And so I'm not arguing for that. They don't do a lot of the codes stuff. They only focused on getting people permitted. But the point is that if you put in place thoughtful legislation, you come up with something that's a reasonable compromise where people think that, yeah, there's a good reason why these rules are in place, people are more likely to follow them. If you come up with something very draconian, like a ban, people are going to be like, no, I don't buy this. And then a lot of people will choose to ignore them. So on the question about bans, again, like, I'm not here to set policy. I can just say that when you run the numbers of short-term rentals, like I did for Nashville here, for cities that have bans, there are thousands of them. Like New York City is a great example. Like there's 46,000 short-term rental listings in the city of New York City, right? And it's technically completely illegal, right? Another place is Santa Monica, California. Last I checked, there was about 1,500 listings. It's completely banned. City of West Hollywood, which is a client of ours, they used to have a ban. They just actually decided to allow hosted rentals, so any room rentals are allowed going forward. And I think that was in response to 2 things. One, they'd found that the ban wasn't working. 2, when you actually analyze the data, they'd received about 800 complaints in the last 2 years. Every single one of them was related to a non-permanent resident-owned, non-hosted rental, right? So it just says a little bit about the types. And I think what's so important here is really this aggregating the issue and understanding that there is nothing like a short-term rental. There are many kinds of short-term rentals, and they have different impacts in different neighborhoods and different cities, and you need to come with something that works for that particular area in order to accomplish your objectives. And I think that's kind of where it's going. So I think I haven't seen a ban that works, let's put it that way. But I've seen a lot of compromise regulation that works with the appropriate enforcement.
Okay. Any other questions from the council? Okay, we'll take a few minutes. And anybody in the audience have a question? Yeah, just come on up to the podium.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is the data that you're getting from Airbnb any different from any other person in the world that they might have? Do you have a special brokerage with them?
No, I'm just getting the same data as everyone else.
Okay, so you have no specific information that nobody else would have access to. Okay. And also, I think from a neighborhood perspective, 2 use cases that come up often, and I hope that you can account for that, are type 1s, I think, that have been falsely filed, is where it's not somebody that actually lives there. If there's an evidence kind of case that could be made for taking pictures. I don't know if out-of-state licenses or cars that are in there, things like this. I think all of these suggest that this is possibly a potential thing without having to find the site that's actually hosting this. And the same, too, for unpermitted properties otherwise, because those are the biggest problems I think a lot of neighborhoods are seeing right now. I'm not sure if you have capabilities that deal with those.
So at the end of the day, we receive evidence of non-permitted properties from different sources. Like one is that we see a listing, we try to match it. The other thing is sometimes, as you point out, we get essentially a tip, call it, from a neighbor who's like, here is what I think is going on, right? Can you help essentially match it to a property? And then we will then go out and specifically investigate that in order to figure out if it does match the listing. If we can't find a listing online for it, we will not come to a conclusion it's a short-term rental, obviously. Like there has to sort of like be the ad and the address. One of the two doesn't work sort of like by themselves.
But I'm wondering if you would collect the evidence over time, because I think if you're seeing this from 5 different sources over a period of months, that there are 50 different cars that are, at a certain residence, and even though the ad can't be found, that would be very helpful, I think, to create a track history.
And we'll capture that again. So there's a dashboard, there's like the tips dashboard, right, where you can see all the tips that were received, and when you get like the same tip, that the same address comes up 5 times, that's where it would be a good use of code enforcement time to maybe do a little bit more investigation, even if we can't find the ad for it.
Okay. Ahmed.
Thanks for your presentation. I was, glad to see you talk about some things as far as, being neighborhood character being important, and you talked about not putting up signs and all that sort of thing, because that's something that we're obviously very interested in too here. And that kind of ties into my question. As far as the Denver model that you were talking about, I was just looking it up. So just so I understand, they only allow people to rent who it's their primary residence. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so that is actually 100% consistent with the policy that that this whole committee is actually formed around, if I understand. Is that correct? Are you familiar with it, 608?
It's a
I
he's
don't-
not familiar.
Okay, well, the
familiar
bill
with
is
that, yeah.
basically to remove non-owner occupied, which would mean that investor-owned or people, the type 2 rentals would not be allowed in residential neighborhoods, and that would be consistent with what you said is best practice and all that, correct?
So I'm not going to make statements like that. Again, policy depends on the circumstances of the particular community. What works for Denver may not work here, and vice versa.
Okay.
So I don't think you can draw conclusions from one city and say, okay, we should just copy paste the ordinance. That's definitely not the way to go. What I think you should do, though, is say, if we have a objective which is doing X, Y, and Z, let's look for the best practices for achieving that objective and be inspired by other cities. Okay. I don't think it's smart to just say, this seemed to work in Denver, therefore it will automatically be the right answer.
Yeah, that wasn't at all what I was saying, but I was just asking if that's what it was to make sure that that was similar to what we are actually trying to do, mainly because you also said that Denver has the highest compliance rate known to man in the STR world, right? 55%, you said?
65.
Wow, even better. Great, thank you.
One of my concerns is whether or not we have adequately funded our codes department to handle all this. I mean, I have a type 1. I've had it since 2010, a room in my house. Enforcement has been our problem ever since we passed this legislation. And so do we have an adequate staff at codes to deal with this? It feels like we never have had that.
And I'm not sure if Mr. Benser can answer that. Obviously,
I'm throwing it out to the council to, think about this. Because even if we get all this information, if nobody's going to enforce, then we're right back to where we were.
Well, so I know that obviously we had a consultant study that came out and talked through all that stuff, and one of the recommendations of that consultant report was to hire a group like Host Compliance. But does anybody want to take a stab at answering the question? Mr. Herbert?
Yeah. So we've got one person that's dedicated to the enforcement of short-term rentals full-time. We just added another person who's dedicated to short-term rental enforcement full-time. I think that having host compliance, and the hard part for the enforcement is determining which properties are the ones out there that need to be enforced against. We can't get the addresses, we can't get the parcel numbers. With that information, we will be able to take these cases and prosecute them much more quickly in much greater numbers through environmental court. So I think, I'm sorry? Right. So the long and short of it is, I think with this type of data, if we can get this type of data, our enforcement will increase dramatically.
It still feels like we're understaffed at codes. I just want to put that out there. I don't think two people, we've got over 2,500 illegal operators at least. It feels like 2 people is not enough. So I'm just going to put that out there.
Yeah, I understand.
For council to think about, or somebody, whoever's making up the budget.
All right, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I have a few questions. The first for host compliance. You mentioned that codes can get email notifications. You obviously have our emergency number if we are a host. Is there a way for us to, A, also get an email notification, and B, let's say I'm going on vacation. Whenever I go out of town, I have somebody who's my backup. I get put in the emergency room for whatever reason, are we able to somehow reach out to you and say, hey, between these dates, this is my backup emergency number, or please contact the local person?
So to address both questions, I'll start with the last one. We do not have sort of like a scheduling system where you can switch out local contact people like every weekend. It would be very difficult to manage. That said, I do like it, so I might build it at some point. So I think the way the ordinance is generally drafted is you appoint one dedicated contact. It can be a number, right? So, I mean, it doesn't have to be a real person. It could also be a property management firm or a security firm or whatever you think is the right way to solve that problem. Right. Your uncle, who knows, right? To address the other question about notification to the host when a complaint is received, I actually think that's a great idea. I would love to build that, and we could do it. The problem, though, is that most cities do not collect the email address of the host as part of the registration. Typically, there's a phone number collected. But I think if the city is rethinking some of these permitting and registration processes, there would be nothing sort of like holding them back from asking for an email address, and it could be something you just basically sign up for. I think it would be great.
Okay. So I guess there's really no way to address, I'm a self-managed, right? We're not a corporation. So I go on vacation to Europe or something like that. I always have somebody here who is another person. What do we do in those instances?
I would just forward your phone to whoever it is, right? So, I mean, whatever phone number you put in, you just basically put on a forwarding number for that couple of days, and I think that will work.
Okay. My second question would be, how do you account for multiple addresses on the same lot? So in Nashville, you can only have one permit per lot, or technically, but I know that unfortunately isn't always adhered to. So let's say you have, 123 Main Street, there's ABC on 123 Main Street. Somebody calls in and says, there's a party at 123 Main Street. How do you identify, especially because those aren't always easily identifiable that it's A or B. How do you work through that so that there's either, not a complaint that goes missed if there really is a problem by the short-term rental, or the flip side, it's not falsely identified if, B is having a party and C is the short-term rental?
That's a good question. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a data management issue that is hard because the data is only as good as what is reported, right? So if the caller calls in and says there's an issue at 123 Main Street, and there are 3 apartments there, and they all happen to be short-term vacation rentals, which is very unlikely to be the case.
They're not allowed to be, so technically only one can be. So how do you identify?
So we would basically then report the one that was identified as being the one that received the complaint, because that would be the best available data. And sure, it could be the neighbor running an unpermitted short-term rental.
Right.
In that case, that's where you need to do some follow-up investigation, right? And I think there's just no way that software will solve that problem.
Okay. And then last but not least, it sounds like you're collecting information from whomever is submitting the complaint to that call-in number. Would there be a way to track, let's say there's one person or a group of people who repeatedly file claims that don't pan out? Is there a way to track those, even if the complaint that it's issued against, even if that person never sees who that is, but the city could see that? So perhaps, hey, this person has filed several complaints. Unfortunately, it happens to a lot of our owners, and a lot of us use software where we can log into our security cameras and see there's actually nothing happening, but we're getting complaints. So would you guys be able to track that to see like, hey, this might be something that also needs to be addressed?
Absolutely, and I think having the transparency and accountability is very important, right? Frivolous complaints are just as bad as complaints. In my book, at the end of the day, like we want justice and fairness, right? So we actually track the phone numbers that are calling into us. We do allow people to not leave their name so they can report anonymously, but we do keep the track of the phone number. So if we get 17 complaints from one phone number, and by the way, that happens because there's some people who have nothing else to do with their life. That will be viewed in a different light than if you get 17 different calls from 17 different phone numbers, right? So we do aggregate that information. Okay. Sure, if the complainant get very sophisticated and buy 17 cell phones and call us, that would be a hard one to fix. Yeah. But probably no one is going to do that.
Okay. Yeah, and just going back to the first question I asked, like maybe as technology develops, if you don't have the opportunity to send emails at this point, or maybe the city can consider collecting that, you know, I mean, you're kind of like, we have a lot of responsibilities as an STR owner to be available at all times, but like, we should be allowed to use the bathroom, or, you know, I mean, literally, if a call comes through and we consider, oh, I didn't answer that for 5 minutes, like, you know, people have to be allowed to have a reasonable response time to something. So I think that needs to be considered, or maybe it's not an email, but maybe it's a text or something that gives us, you know, a 5 to 10 minute window. Most of us are glued to our phones, but life happens. I mean, I was put in the emergency room unexpectedly 2 weeks ago, and, you know, my husband's there and he can get it, but you only have my phone number, you know, so there has to be some expectation, I would hope, that the committee would consider for life. So, thank you.
Well, it is now a little bit after 7 o'clock. We got one question left, and it better be a short one.
What access is the public going to have to this data?
Right, so the data that we collect is provided to the city in a secure environment. So it's all on an encrypted website with passwords and all that good stuff. At the end of the day, every city and state have public records laws, and like I would encourage you, if you're interested in this data, to explore what you can get through that process. And we do not make our data available to anyone who asks for it. Like, you have to go through a proper channel and process for that.
Okay, so it is a little bit after 7. Mr. Bencher, that's an excellent report. Thank you. Thank you for the PowerPoint and all the information. I appreciate you taking all the questions. Mr. Kelly, I appreciate you getting Mr. Bencher here. And you may have more work to do while you're here, but I think your work here is done. We will meet next Wednesday at 5 o'clock downstairs back in the jury assembly room. We're going to hear from Mr. Hollins and I think we've got some owners that will be testifying as well. So that's what we'll be doing next week, and then we'll have some more information after that. Next week, 5 o'clock, Wednesday, downstairs, ground floor, jury assembly room. Okay? We stand adjourned. Thank you.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.net.